here in Brazil, we have a country divided by the right and the left, and talking about politics. It's sad because the the guy who represents the left here in Brazil and the guy who represents the right wing in Brazil, the Bolsonaro, the president right now, they are the favorites to win the election in October. They live in a small bubble and they don't listen to another person different from them. So how can we change this type of behavior?
I think what's important, especially when you're thinking about right-wing authoritarianism specifically, is to understand the psychology of why some people want right-wing authoritarian leaders. And what you find amongst people who support sort of right-wing authoritarianism, they in particular have a low tolerance for uncertainty. And what they really care about more than anything else is this idea of social order. They want law and order. They want social cohesion. They want to feel, most of the people who want right-wing authoritarianism are the people who are happiest living in a small town where everybody knows their neighbors, everybody knows each other. It's sort of like society works in a kind of nice way because there's interpersonal reputation that's keeping everything in order. It's homogenous enough of a group. There's enough reputational costs that people don't behave badly, and that it's kind of it creates a nice working environment. It's like a little village, right? But then they look at the rest of the country, and they don't see that same working order, right? They see chaos. They maybe look at Rio de Janeiro, they look at other parts, Sao Paulo, and they'll see crime being run rampant all over the place. They'll see clashes of tribalism of different forms and socioeconomic clashes. And this idea that society is falling apart and there's no sense of humanity anymore. And there's no sense of love thy neighbor anymore. And there's no sense of just general social order. And that's what makes them like the idea of a strong, authoritarian leader, because they see that person is going to come into the country and bring order, bring law and order back, get these people to stop fighting. It's almost like a strong father figure who's going to take the little kids who are all fighting with each other and pull them apart and say, no, you go to your room, you go to your room, you behave. And all of a sudden, they think anyways, crime will drop down, people will start behaving in a more respectful way. In a sense, if you look at, I think the way they see a country is, if you look at a country like a brain, they'll look at the way things are right now is almost there's no regulation. There's no emotional regulation in this brain. What you have is a brain that's totally out of control, that's acting just on impulses, and there's no impulse control. And as a result, you basically have a teenager, a pubescent, child whose behavior is erratic and all over the place. And that's how they see the country. They see the country as like an adolescent child. And the idea is that a right-wing authoritarian leader is going to essentially become the self-control, emotional regulation part of the brain. You're adding it in by adding this leader who's going to take this petulant child and turn it into a mature adult that has some self-control and dignity and will keep things in control. So that's part of the motivation. And look, we shouldn't denigrate people who feel that way, right? Because they're not completely wrong. If you look at New York City, or even like I live in London, this is where I am right now in London, there's benefits to living in a highly multicultural, big city where people are a bit anonymous and you have different ethnic groups and different socioeconomic classes. It's very creative, right? There's all sorts of great science and art that comes out of it and wild creativity, but they're right. There's social disorder here. It's true. There's more crime here. There's even more polluting here. There's more people defacing property here. There's the police and the authority figures and the regular populace have a lot more clash amongst themselves. So it is a bit more wild and untamed and slightly dangerous. The goal of any society is to find a way to balance itself, and to have places where people who maybe can't handle a London or a Rio or a New York, they can have where they want to live, where people who like the excitement and are willing to take the risk can go to those big cities. I think part of the problem now is also with social media is the fact that, before, if you were someone living a quiet life in a small town in a rural area and everybody knew their neighbors and there was social disorder or whatever outside, you weren't really experiencing it. Now you open your phone and you'll see all sorts of videos of violence and crime and rape and mayhem and police brutalizing people or people brutalizing police or whatever, and you're being bombarded with these images that you're essentially living in your own country as a kind of war zone. And this is maybe going to motivate, especially those kind of people, to want to have a right-wing authoritarian leader elected.